Hi, Dr. Dena. How you doing?
Hi, good to be with you.
Yes, good to have you on again.
I feel like she's a regular now.
Oh, yes,
She's on
yes,
so often. I love
for sure. Yeah, this diversity and inclusion is such an important topic. I mean that and now more than ever, I think, and as we are becoming a more of a global community. And so I'm glad we have an expert on the forum to guide us and guide our listeners on proper practice. So it's going to be great.
And she does it so well, because I remember the last time, because I think I missed the very last one you were here. I think I was away, but the one before that, I just remember the chat was going off. I couldn't even get through all the questions because it was just, people were so engaged and really had a lot to ask. I wish we could have kept it going.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very well received.
Perfect. And Shar, you're down. I know you've relocated to your winter haven in the warm country of Mexico. Is that right? And so you're just getting everything set up today. So your audio.
Today until we get all the kinks worked out, but I'm in Puerto Vallarta now.
Great. So yeah. So hopefully we can get your audio to work.
There in the warm weather.
Perfect. Yeah. So
yeah, I might be choppy.
Yeah, right. You're coming in crazy choppy right now. So
maybe she can write in the chat. Maybe that'll.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, do that, Shar. So if they have questions and stuff, you can add it in the chat, and so we can capture your thoughts there. And so Jules, if you can help us see what Shar is saying on chat and can bring it live onto the discussion today.
I'll be her voice.
Yeah, right.
Question, Sam. It says on the bottom of my, because you made me the co-host, the live transcript on the bottom right corner. Is that the closed captioning?
Yep, that's right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So hopefully that'll continue to work okay, because it hasn't worked smoothly for me in the past. So we'll see how it goes. All right, great. So yeah, so Shar, I'm super jealous that she's in that warm weather in the South now, and in Colorado here we just had some. I just woke up to some frost on the ground, and so winter is coming along.
Starting.
Yeah. And I know, Jules, you're still in a warm spot, but Dena, how are things in the East?
It's a gorgeous day today, I have to say. Here we are in almost the middle of November, and I think it's probably going to be 70 degrees today, so no complaints whatsoever.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I have not been able to visit the East in the fall time frame. I want to go up to the northwest, or I mean the northeast up there, and see the transition of the trees and the colors and so forth.
It is beautiful. I'm looking out right now to like browns and yellows and oranges, and oh, it's so pretty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Super envious.
I forget.
I'm in Virginia. Right outside of DC. So
very nice. I'm very jealous. Yeah, the leaves, something about it. It's just so like, nature's beautiful. Seeing the transitions, and so nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's something so calming about it. I think that we're just outdoor people by nature, I think, and we just love to see the trees. I mean, even we as you think about how we do even in cities, we preserve places where we can go, and like Central Park, and enjoy the change of seasons and see things. I think that we're creatures of the outdoors. So love that. But yeah, part of our discussion today is in preparation to that. A lot of holidays are coming up, and really understanding and being inclusive during the holidays is a big topic today. So I'm so happy to have your experience here, Dr. Samuels, and guiding us through this topic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's funny. I was reading, because we'll talk about more of this in the I guess I'll hold it for the discussion. We have 3 more minutes. I just want to jump right into it, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, also,
Lady-
there's, yeah, so much to cover on these topics too. So it's like, yeah, we want to dive in. And I see Daniel's already ready. He's always ready. You can always rely on
Yes.
him to be here, showing up early, ready with his energy.
Thank you,
Jackson's
Daniel.
here as well. Hi, Jackson.
Mhm. So, but anyway, then and also just all the events that we're preparing for at the end of the year. I mean, the gatherings that we've done in the past. I mean, I'm not sure if that's what companies are thinking about this year as far as gatherings, and that's a big question mark. I know that some of the larger firms are still waiting, but some smaller companies are still thinking about getting together for getting the team together for holiday celebrations and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes this year.
Yeah, I think we were all hoping this time last year that this would be long past us, the pandemic.
Right.
Not so much. We're still in it. So
Yep. Still in it, still dealing with the different types of repercussions that we've been talking about on the forum for the past several weeks. For instance, the people looking for new work, new opportunities, because they've found that they may have lost passion or found new passions during the pandemic that they want to achieve, understanding that life is finite, and they wanted to look at new things. Also, what we've experienced is due to that. I mean, in my world, I mean, there's been increases in pay levels for a lot of positions for those that have been on the front lines, material handlers and HR practitioners that are coming up with new policies and practices during this time, doing a lot of heavy lifting. And then during the Great Resignation that started this past July, a lot of companies are reacting to that. I mean, how to change their pay practices to retain people, how to have those important conversations. We talked about retention interviews earlier this year, and trying to see what the mindset of your employees are. So a lot of important topics that are going on, and which makes this time quite exciting. So I'm glad that we're doing this right now and having these discussions and moving things forward to stay on track with everything. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So Jules, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and then we can kick things off.
Yeah, let's do it. Awesome.
All right. Here we go.
Here we go. All right. Awesome. So, and Sumit's just hopping on right on time. Perfect. Hi, Sumit. All right, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the People Strategies Forum. My name is Jules. It is so exciting to have you all here with us today. If you don't know what's going on today, we actually have Dr. Dena Samuels returning to talk about inclusion and the holidays. So stick around. I will introduce her in just a moment. But if it is anyone's first time here, we always like to welcome you, make sure you know what happens here every week. And the People Strategies Forum really is a mastermind of leaders that are dedicated to creating workplaces where people thrive, employers reward, and customers love. So we get together every week, different speaker, we cover different topics. Like Sam was saying, we want to be ahead of the game. Things are changing rapidly, and we want to help guide you so that you're ready for all these changes that happen so drastically nowadays. So again, my name is Jules. I help to host the forum, and I am joined by a lovely panel of guests. So they include Shah, and Shah is down in Mexico, very jealous, enjoying the warm weather in her new place. So her Wi-Fi is not being very forgiving today, so we'll have to be a little patient with that. She might be a little choppy. So Shah, write in the chat if you need to, and I can read your comments out loud if need be. But Shah is yeah. We're all it's Okay, sorry. I thought I heard her say something else. So Shah, a little bit about her background. She is an HR expert and professional. She has over 20 years of working in the corporate world. And then she eventually branched out and created her own company, Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. So she is the founder and CEO of that. And yeah, living the nomadic dream between Mexico and Colorado. So happy to have her here. We also have the lovely Sumit, and Sumit has well over 16 years of experience as an HR consultant, working with some large scale companies across the world. And Sam as well. We have Sam. So Sam is the founder and CEO of Comp Team. He helps companies restructure their talent initiatives and their compensation programs so they can function a lot better. And Dr. Dena Samuels is our special guest today. We are so excited to have her back. Here's her bio up on the screen. She is the founder of Dena Samuels Consulting. She consults full-time on inclusive leadership development. But not only that, she is also a mindfulness-based diversity, equity, and inclusion author, speaker, leadership trainer as well. And she comes from a place of service. She really wants to help companies. She's helped HR professionals with any kind of issues that they were having within the workplace. And she guides leaders on what they need to do next in their workplace, how to strategize a new plan. And we're just so happy to have her back. So if you guys have any questions at all, you want to get interactive in the chat, we encourage it. I know last time she was here, we had so many comments and questions. So please keep that energy up for her, and that'll actually help guide our conversation and cater it best to all of you. So I won't take up any more time, but welcome, Dr. Dena.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for having me back, I should say. And looking forward to the coming holidays, and I'm excited about this conversation. Mm-hmm.
And one thing, Dr. Samuels, is Jules was talking about, how you interface with a lot of professionals out there, either leaders or HR professionals or diversity and inclusion professionals. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about how you typically work with people?
So typically somebody, an organization, an HR person will call me and say, either we're having an issue that we need help solving, or we know that we need to do something, but we're not quite sure what to do in terms of leadership development and inclusive leadership development in particular. And so this is when I jump in and I say I can help with, your diversity, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, strategic plan, or planning. I can do equity audit where we take sort of a deep dive. How are you doing right now? Where do you want to go? I do lead retreats with boards of directors, with HR folks, with DEI groups of folks, whomever the client needs, and really again look at what are the goals of the organization. Yeah. And so with that, then comes some training, because we don't know everything we need to know about implicit bias and microaggressions and communication, inclusive in communication and all of that. And so I have basically a whole academy of trainings that I can provide as well.
Great. Yeah, well, the big topic today is, of course, diversity and inclusion during this holiday time. I mean, there's the one thing that's happened through the pandemic is remote work. And what's happened is, as we've expanded our workforce across the globe, we're doing hiring, we're interacting with people from different cultures and so forth. And companies in the US have been traditionally very US centric, right? Very Christian oriented in mindset and so forth. And as we're thinking about how we're interacting with different cultures, I think it's very timely and very important for us to start thinking about diversity and inclusion in that context. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on that?
100% agree with that. I think that especially with the pandemic, as you mentioned, that we're all accustomed to using Zoom and other platforms to bring people in from all over the globe. And so our work workforce looks, is going to continue to look different than it has in the past, partly because we're not just looking at talent that lives in our particular neck of the woods, that people now, you could have a job, from your workforce could be from across the globe. Yeah. And so, if people are working online, obviously it doesn't really matter where they're situated. And so that brings a beautiful benefit of diverse ways of thinking, diverse, culture, all of that is beautiful. And at the same time, maybe brings a few challenges along the way of trying to acclimate to a different workforce than what we had before.
Right. And I know, Sumit, you're quite an expert on dealing with different cultures because of your location and your past experience. In working with different cultures, I mean, is there anything that you recognize that Americans perhaps have lacked as compared to other types of companies and just in general, or just individuals in general?
I think it would be a little unfair on my part to single out Americans just because.
Oh, come on, Sumit. You're in good company.
I'm trying to be inclusive, right? And prevent my conscious and unconscious biases from coming into play. So I think over the last 20 years or so, I've largely worked with North Americans. And I mean, I think it's largely true for any culture I worked with. People tend to assume that what's true for their culture is true for the rest of the world as well. So, for example, now, of course, it's a much more global and connected world than it used to be 2 decades ago. But people find it really surprising. Oh, you don't have Christmas in India? That's surprising. So what do you do for Christmas? And nothing, we just work. And I mean, I think overall, the way we work, the way we have different holidays is a little surprising because also coming from India, we've got 29 states, and every state has its own festivals of importance. So there are a couple of national festivals. There are also some state level festivals which are really, really dear to people who celebrate them. And we ourselves don't really understand or can't really keep track of so many of them. So it does create a bit of an issue when you're working with people from different cultures or from a different state altogether.
Yeah, and so I'm often wonder what is the best thing to do, Dr. Samuels. I mean, when in an organization where we go through a bunch of hiring, we're hiring from different countries around the world and so forth, and we know that we have a basket of people with of a variety of different beliefs and they celebrate at different times and so forth. And so what do you typically recommend a company should do in this particular situation when should they do kind of like an audit of their people to understand what's going on and what their beliefs are? Or what do you think is the best way here?
It's a great question. I love the question. And I will tell you from my own background of coming from I started off at the university for, I was teaching at the university for 20 years and consulting along, with companies and organizations as well. But my experience in a public university was that, Christmas was it. I would come into my own office space and find a tree that was 2 stories high. And that was it. It was the Christmas holiday project was what it was called. And which I'm glad that, it's outreach into the community and all of that. That's beautiful work. But at that time of year, I always felt like, okay, I'm going to work. I'm going to a place that is not my home. And I can't stress enough how important it is for employees to have a sense of belonging. In fact, what I'll say is that, as we know, the millennials are growing in number. And I'm sure you've all heard this number that by 2025, they'll make up upwards of 75% of our workforce. Millennials are not only expecting inclusion, they're expecting belonging. So we need to like get ahead of the curve on that, so that when I would come into my space, it was with a lot of work, a lot of conversations that we finally, I feel like I finally got through. A few colleagues and I kind of came forward and said, this is not, I don't feel so included this month, the whole month. I think about that in school systems as well, that, the idea that the whole month of December is filled with, Santa Claus and whatever, even for little ones, and that they're learning that this is all there is. So there's a few, I think about it as like, do's and don'ts almost, that I think are really important to consider. The do's might be something like making sure that you are, you have a multicultural calendar, right? That is maybe global, and it's, the ones that have the most different cultures represented are the ones that are the best. It's a little overwhelming because you start with those kinds of calendars, you'll notice that there's some holiday almost every single day of the year.
Yeah.
And the idea isn't that you need to know about every single one. That is not what I'm suggesting at all, but rather that even sending something like that out, even online. There's one that I liked that's at kazoo, kazoohr.com. That I really like. It's not fully comprehensive, but it's really good. And so if you take a peek at that, and you'll see that it goes through lots of different holidays for different cultures and all of that. And that's sort of, if you are basing your communication on the idea, the concept that we are not just a Christian culture, that's really what matters. Mm-hmm. That's what people want to see, and that's what is going to make everyone feel like they belong, right? So and I will say, except for some traditional Christians who will say, you're taking away my Christmas. If you don't say, if we say, please don't say Merry Christmas, say Happy Holidays, to really be inclusive of everyone. There are some Christians who will say, wait a minute, that's not fair. But realizing that they've had the benefit, the unearned benefit, really the privilege, in the language that I would use, of not having to think about other cultures for however long until now.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, if we really want people to feel like they belong, and the fact that our workforce is much more global, and so, not to say that there aren't Christians in all parts of the world, but there's also a lot of other religions and spiritualities and practices, right? That may or may not even be religious. They're more thinking about like a New Year or something like that, like Chinese New Year, or even the Jewish New Year's and the high holy days that come in the fall. So just being conscious of this, I think, opens people's minds to what diversity, what inclusion looks like, not just what diversity looks like in terms of the numbers and who's here, but how people are feeling about being here in your company.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something you brought up earlier in our discussion pre-session. You were talking about, there's a thing about being culturally competent or being culturally sensitive or responsive. So can you tell us a little bit about those concepts?
Sure. And that goes back to what I was saying perfectly, that, I was saying, we're not expected, I'm not expecting anyone as a diversity and inclusion and belonging, really, and equity consultant. I'm not expecting anyone to be an expert in all the different religions or practices or holidays or whatever. I'm not expecting that at all. In fact, even as a Jewish person myself, I have to look on the calendar every year because it changes when the holidays come, because we're not based on the same, on the same calendar. It's a lunar calendar. So, for me, I have to look it up. when the holidays are. Of course, I know I have probably a better idea than most people about what those holidays mean and their significance, but to know that there are other, that there are other cultures. So in what I think about cultural competence, you can never be culturally competent.
Mhm.
Like there's no such thing as being fully culturally competent. I would never call myself a culturally competent person. I would say I'm culturally sensitive. I come with some humility in terms of knowing that I don't know all of the things, I don't know everything, and some responsiveness. I'm culturally responsive in terms of being sensitive to the needs of other cultures. And I may not know what those needs are in particular, but I know to ask.
Yeah.
Right. The point of like, for example, Christian normativity is the term that we use, where we just assume that everybody's Christian. That notion is a privileged notion, and it causes exclusion. Yeah.
And one of the things that, I try to be more aware of, I just think about, because I'm a Christian, and I just, the holiday is such a special time for me and my children and so forth. And I think about all the happiness that happens around that time, and how I try to protect that time as much as possible. And then of course I had to remember when somebody else when somebody else comes up and they're saying that, oh, I'm celebrating, this time from a different culture, or we're taking this time off. I need to remember that how I feel about my Christmas, and how I need to think about how they may be feeling right now about their special time off. And sometimes it's just that you got to take a breather, and to think about that. So, Sumit, I know you deal with this all the time, because you're really, it's part of your natural ability. When you're telling me about the Festival of Lights and so forth, and it's like, oh, it's kind of like your Christmas and so forth. And I'd like going, oh, ding, ding, ding. That's something that I need to bring a parallel to. I need to understand the cultural significance of that particular holiday and so forth. But do you, I imagine you probably don't even realize you're doing that, Sumit, when you're saying those things. You're making that, you're relating and creating that, or you're relating that to others.
Maybe you're right. So the interesting thing about American holidays is that they're all pervasive. So thanks to the influence of Hollywood, pretty much everyone knows what the 4th of July stands for and how you celebrate your Independence Day.
Yeah.
Christmas. So there's a funny anecdote. I was in Mongolia a few years ago, and in their central square, they put up a 60 feet tall Santa, who was carrying a glass of Coca-Cola. And I just asked somebody, that is Christmas a big festival? Are a lot of people here Christian? They said, no, in fact, there are hardly any Christians or even any religious people. But yeah, we get lots of sales and discounts on Christmas, so we absolutely love it. So for them, it was more of almost like a commercial holiday. It's yes, all clients and all the people who are expats are traveling home, so you get some downtime, and all the stores have discount offers. So hence, Christmas automatically becomes more important than their local holidays as well in some circumstances. But I think one can't really do away with the influence of American holidays, because Hollywood is all over. So one does have to keep that in mind. But at the same time, I think the idea should be to be a little more receptive to, or just be a little more understanding about other people's holidays. Of course, like Dr. Samuel said, and so did you, we can't really be expected to keep track of whose holiday it is today, also because a lot of religions do follow the lunar calendar. So there are no fixed dates to festivals, and so you can't really say, I'll remember the date next year and wish somebody on my team. But I think as long as we're prepared to make mistakes and also forgive other people's mistakes when it comes to religions. Like long ago, I remember one of my colleagues, they ended up wishing an American client a happy Good Friday. and the person was horrified. They actually sent out nasty mailers saying this person has deeply disrespected my religious beliefs and I would like to see them fired. And the person, of course, the person who made the mistake, they were genuinely apologetic, and they expressed a desire to learn about different cultures and different religions, and it genuinely felt very guilty that I didn't really know the significance, and of course was a mistake, but I really thought the client was significantly overreacting, and I think that kind of needs to reduce a little bit as well. So we need to be a little more tolerant and a little more inclusive when it comes to this.
Yeah, and so Dr. Dena, so how do we coach managers on this? I mean, there are individuals out there that can, you know, become offended and so forth in a situation where they may feel like they've been slighted by another person that is you know, ignorant or not up to the know of the significance of a particular holiday or something. So how do you guide leaders on these aspects?
Well, I think there's some basic things that I think are good practices. And like I was saying before, sort of the do's and don'ts, like I wouldn't send out, I mean, unless you're working in a Christian organization and it's very clear that, you know, that people in there are Christian, I wouldn't send out a happy, you know, Merry Christmas email to the whole place. I would say happy holidays, which is more inclusive, even for those who don't celebrate anything during the month of December. We're all celebrating New Year's, right? So that's a you know, a positive message is happy holidays. I'm thinking about you. I hope you and your family, or you and yours are doing well, or whatever. That's, I think, a good practice, but also remembering that I know it's not just in Judaism, but in other cultures as well, that it's not necessarily one specific date or of each year, but that, for example, in Judaism, our holidays go from sundown to sundown. So even if you see something on the calendar that, you know, that Hanukkah starts on whatever, the 29th of December or November, whatever it falls on, it actually starts the night before. So, you know, and thinking about those kinds of things, that it's not all just, you know, if you come from the Christian normative standpoint, you think, well, it says it on the calendar and I tried. It still bears asking questions. And I think that's the best practice as well. Knowing, for example, or asking about which are the days of the holidays that you would need time off for. So, for example, I wouldn't need time off for during Hanukkah. I love the evenings with my family, but I don't necessarily, it's 8 nights. It's not, you know, during the day we, you know, it's not necessary not to work. On the other hand, the high holy days, it's really important that we have the day off. So, you know, we end up in synagogue, or at this point virtual synagogue, you know, for like Yom Kippur from sundown to sundown. So it's like that. So knowing that there are differences in terms of even how we celebrate, and that different holidays call for different things. And so it's really learning, but it's also not feeling comfortable asking the questions and coming at it saying, you know, I really want to honor where you're coming from. And if they're, you know, that notion of being flexible, saying, you know, you may maybe in my organization, it's important for some folks to work during Christmas. Well, who can step forward and work during Christmas that it won't be as much of an imposition? And then, you know, and then allowing that flexibility of folks to be able to take off the time that they need. I think that flexibility is a great practice as well.
And so another thing, I mean, just as far as, but there are some leaders out there that want to, like Sumit was saying, they want to show their respect for a particular holiday. They have a coveted employee. They know they're from a different culture and different belief set, and they want to respect and honor that time off. But just like you said, around the Hanukkah, it's like, well, you don't really need to take, you know, it's not necessarily to take the time off of work, but showing, so what can leaders do to better understand? I mean, is it just come out and ask the questions, or what's the best way to start that dialogue?
So, I think that first of all, as I was mentioning before about sending out, a calendar, a
Yeah.
multicultural calendar, I think is a great practice because that's going to everyone. And rather than going up to someone and say, I think you're not Christian. So, what do you need? That's not as inclusive as sending out a blanket statement to the organization saying, we value everyone, we value all of our staff, our employees, our workforce. We would like to hear from you. Or if it's a very large company, maybe it's, report to your direct supervisor and work with your direct supervisor to figure out what is needed, what the question is, what the most respectful thing is to do. And so it may be, what days do you need, in terms of what may be off, or maybe it's even asking the question, how can I wish you a memorable holiday? What does that look like? And so having some kind of basic questions that you can ask and putting it out to the whole organization. So the whole organization is aware that you are celebrating and embracing the differences, which are beautiful, right? It's beautiful that we come together, and we know there's a million reasons why we need to do that, right? Not the least of which, as I said before, is about belonging, creating belongingness, but really giving people the opportunity to share what it is they need, right? And how what the salutation is, in terms of, I wouldn't want somebody to wish me a happy Yom Kippur either. That's, a day of atonement. That's a very solemn day. So what could you say instead? So those kinds of questions, I think, are beautiful, inclusive practices. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've got a question here. Do you think we could take a more proactive approach, and let's say a company could just at the beginning of the calendar year or financial year or any time at all, just say that we love to celebrate our people, we love to celebrate with them. Why don't you share a festival of great significance for you, how you celebrate it? We'd love to learn from your practices. And then, so one, you could put that in a newsletter or an intranet kind of place if required. In case there are also in-person celebrations, it would really make the person feel included. That's one. Second, they wouldn't really feel singled out, or they wouldn't be made to feel different. So somebody coming to me and saying, I was reading that you've got this particular festival coming up. How do you want me to wish you? I may or may not be. I might take it the other way as an employee and say, hang on, is it because I'm the only Indian guy on the team that you're kind of singling me out and putting me on the spot? So I think it might work better to just send out a message saying, we love to celebrate all of our people. Mm-hmm. Let us know what's of significance to you, and we'd love to learn about your culture.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful practice in a newsletter or something like that. But I also think it needs to go a little bit further in terms of supervisors may need a little bit of training if they're feeling, if they're not used to having these kinds of conversations. That's leadership development, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we need to see, that supervisors or managers or whomever are on board with this. Mm-hmm. And so it may be from a senior leadership to say, look, we want to be inclusive. Here's what we're hoping that you will do, or we're expecting you to do with your team or your department or whatever, you're leading. And so that the team leaders, whatever, again, supervisors, managers, et cetera, executive folks, that they would maybe send out another message saying, you heard this from the top, that we want to do this. I'm also reiterating how important, how much I value all of you. And please reach out if you have some, if you have a request. Maybe there's different newsletters that could go out and, that are more departmental focused, but inviting people to share their experiences as was said and some had read, I think is a beautiful practice, because it's not requiring, it's not singling anyone out. It's more saying, we invite you in to have this conversation, and to let us know more about who you are. And, and if they choose not to share because they're feeling like, well, are they asking this because whatever, or making me feel that I'm different? That's not going to go over well, but saying anybody who wants to is welcome to.
Mhm. Right. No, Dr. Samuels, I know that I mean, as we were just talking about, you help provide leadership training on inclusion and so forth, and these different things. So right now, leaders are on Zoom more than ever. I mean, they're working with different cultures across the globe. They're talking to colleagues and so forth. And so basically, they may come on a call like this, or a Zoom call with a particular person from a different culture. What is the best practices they could do to just make sure that they're being respectful and engaging with that person in a proper manner, not knowing about those cultural norms that that they may not be aware of?
Yeah, we were talking about the fact that, we're living in this global world now, and more so than before. And
Mhm.
I mentioned that, if somebody, if you knew you were going to have a call with somebody from, Eastern Asia, or, a place in the world that you may not be as familiar with if you live in the United States, that, you could do some homework and figure out, learn a little bit so that what the basic cultural norms are of that place. But it's harder to do that today, right? It's harder because people are coming in from all over the planet, and so you can't know everything about everything. So the idea here is, again, coming from that place of cultural humility as much as possible, continuing to learn. As you learn things, maybe you keep a notebook, a multicultural notebook, where you're taking notes of like, oh yeah, and refresh your memory before a call of some things that are the people that you expect, from the places in the world that you expect. Having those ideas in your head will go a long way. But I think coming from a place of sensitivity and, yeah, as I said, humility, cultural humility is critically important. That the idea that, coming from an ethnocentric place where, well, this is the way I celebrate, or this is how I am in the world, so therefore everyone is very problematic and certainly exclusionary. So if you come from the other place, which is much more mindful, much more kind and friendly and open-hearted, I think you'll go a long way. That's not to say that I'm encouraging colorblindness, which is a different thing altogether, right? Colorblindness is, well, I'm not going to even mention your holidays, or I'm not going to talk about, your culture, because we're all the same. We don't want to do that either. That's actually a racist practice to do that. So we want to embrace our differences. That's what's going to make people feel truly included. Without singling people out, but more the idea of making people feel like this is their home away from home, that it is second nature for them to be interacting, in this space, that this space is, I don't typically use the term safe space, because what's safe for one person may not be safe for another, but I say a more inclusive space where people feel like they can engage.
That's great. So yeah, and I know that having that awareness and so forth is so critical this time of year, but so I really appreciate you giving us some guidance there on what managers should do. But one thing that you mentioned, and I think Sumit brought up as well, is just as far as the impact of modern media on how we think of holidays and across the globe and so forth. I mean, as Sumit was just talking about, the Coca-Cola Santa in a place that they don't even know who Santa is probably. And so it's like, and I was also reading about the practice of this in Japan as well, having of course, having Santa and having almost a shopping holiday, as you were talking about, Sumit. So I thought that was a very interesting parallel. But when we think back of how we're influenced and so forth, from if you could advise media and Hollywood and so forth, Dr. Samuels, what are some changes that you would recommend in those practices?
I would strongly encourage people, whether it's me or someone else, there's lots of us out there doing really good trainings on specifically on implicit bias and microaggressions, because I would consider it a microaggression if someone wished me a happy Yom Kippur. Like, they don't know, they mean well, their intent is good, but it doesn't land well, right? And that, that is, some of them are more minor and some of them feel a lot more major, and even when the intent is good. And I am, so far what we've talked about is having a good intention, having an open heart, being, coming at it with some humility, and all of those pieces I think are really important. But at the end of the day, when we make a mistake, and I always put mistake in quotes because I find they're learning opportunities. That's really the way I see them, but most people would call them mistakes. And when that happens, what do? Do you run because you're ashamed that you said something that you shouldn't have? Or do you know how to engage the conversation where somebody will feel heard, like, and held in many ways, and that you build relationships across those social differences rather than causing a rift? And so I've talked about microaggressions with you before on your program here, but just the idea that we're not taught that. We're not taught how to do that, how to call people into the conversation rather than calling them out. And so I feel like training is critically important. And I would say that to Hollywood as well, that there's so many microaggressions that happen in the media. People say things and they don't know what they're saying. Like, they don't realize that they're causing a problem. So this isn't blaming or shaming anyone. It's more that you have to acknowledge that we don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything about every culture. So we need to learn, and we need to be able to have conversations that are sometimes difficult, courageous conversations is, that this is it's a thing, right? It's something we need to pay attention to and to practice. And once we get better at that kind of communication, then when we say something that, out of our own ignorance, somebody can, gently call us into the conversation and say, hey, when you said that, you may not know, but, can we have a conversation about what that felt like to me? And, you go from there.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. So for instance, if I said something very inappropriate and I didn't realize it at the time, and to Jules, and I can see, and I can see that she's upset, and so forth. I mean, how do I right that wrong? I mean, what is the best path to redemption?
Sure. So that's a whole training.
Okay.
But I can say this, that if you notice that somebody kind of freezes, you can see their body language, if that's feasible to you, maybe, either they're not on screen or they're, or maybe your vision is not, you're not capable of seeing that. Sometimes we can sense it, but if you notice, maybe their language changes or there's a coldness coming from them or whatever, saying to them, did I say something that might have offended you in any way? Like, that's perfectly reasonable, because then they can say, well, actually you did, or maybe they're nervous at that moment and don't feel comfortable. Maybe there's more people around and they don't want to call anybody out, and they may say, no, it's okay, whatever. Hopefully they will come back later. So this is what building relationship looks like, that if these challenges happen, if you do say something, that hopefully you're building a community in your organization where people feel like they can come forward and speak their truth, right? And tell their story and say how it felt to them. If that's not happening in your organization, you're missing out on such a great opportunity for not only professional development and leadership development, but also cohesion, loyalty in the organization. You're building communication skills. Your people are feeling listened, like they're being heard. All of that are such beautiful outcomes of something that might have started as something very bad, like Sumit's example of somebody reacted. That's how I would say somebody reacted who was on the receiving end of what I would consider a microaggression. And again, the person who did it didn't intend to. They clearly meant to honor that person, and instead it didn't land. It landed in a way that had a strong impact. And so that person, if the culture wasn't inclusive and the culture wasn't all about belonging, that person then felt like they had to push back so much so that they're like, that was a reaction they had, right? Mm-hmm. This was the outcome of that, the reaction that no, this person needs to be fired. This is terrible. As opposed to saying, wow, this person didn't know what they were doing. Can we have a conversation about this? And coming forward, and then all of a sudden you start building relationship. I have very strong relationships with people that I've microaggressed against, partly because I follow, I've created a strategy of, here's, you do this first and this, and I remembered it in the moment, because I have mnemonics and whatever to help me remember exactly what to do. And I have beautiful relationship developed after those kinds of things, even when you're feeling all the shame of, oh my gosh, I feel like I should have known. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of good things to think about there. But I do want to, as we're approaching the top of the hour here, first, I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, to make sure that they put those in the chat, and Jules can bring those up in just a moment. But as we're, actually, unfortunately, I can't share my screen anymore because the closed captions have crashed Zoom, and so I have no control any longer. But
I think as you made me co-host too, Sam. I'm writing in the chat, and I don't think. Are you getting in my chat comments?
I see it.
You see it? Oh, okay. I don't know. Maybe it's just happening for me and Sam. I'm like, I can't see what I'm writing. Sorry. Going in blindly.
Okay.
Can you chat?
Oh, there it is. Okay. I don't know what happened. It just came up. Okay.
All right. Well, I did want to share my screen so I can introduce our speaker for next week. But unfortunately, I cannot do that. But we are going to have Krista Resnick join us for next week on the People Strategy Forum. She's going to be talking about preparing for success as a leader in 2022. And that's one topic I wanted to bring up with you, Dr. Samuels, because I know you have a special workshop that you're working on how to be a better leader for next year, or as we mentioned, a new you for 2022, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. I like the idea of reinventing, that we are coming out of, hopefully, we're coming out of the pandemic at any minute now, right? But the idea of, thinking about the lessons that we've learned over the course of the last almost 2 years, right? And what does that mean? What is the significance to you in that? And knowing that there's so much going on, not only around the planet, health and wellness wise, but also we're looking at, the Black Lives Matter movement, and, there's so much climate change and all of these things that are that can really make us feel unseated, ungrounded. And so I have this new program that I'm offering based on, I did this with a client. A client asked me to do this, and they were so excited about how it went that I was like, and I loved it. I loved doing it. So I was like, oh, I want to do more of this. So I'm calling it a group coaching experience, and it's really based in the heart of mindfulness. And the idea of how do we learn enough about ourselves and our own, not only our own emotions and our own thoughts, but also our interactions with others. And how do we learn enough so that we can actually tweak those and not only calm ourselves down, but also calm our interactions with others down. It's really about de-escalating in any given moment. And so there's very specific practices that I really talk about in my latest book, The Mindfulness Effect. And so what I ended up doing was using my book, The Mindfulness Effect, as sort of a way to structure our time together in this group coaching experience so that people could bring in their own experiences in their own lives. And what I found was that this client who invited me to do this, what they started doing, they started telling me that, hey, I thought this was going to be great for the workplace, and it was, but it's not just great for the workplace. I'm noticing my interactions not only with, when I'm by myself, but also when I'm interacting with my spouse or partner, my kids, my parents, my friends, my family, any other family members, that it's transformed their lives, transformed the ways that they are showing up in the world and the way they're interacting with others. And so, yeah, it's called a group coaching experience, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested in participating. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a fascinating and very, very important thing to have at this time. And because there's just so many things that have happened in this past year and a half that we would have never have perceived. I mean, who would have thought that wearing a mask could be a political statement, or getting getting a shot, or there's a number of things that are just seem so just unthinkable of just a year ago. So it's amazing the changes that we're going through as a community and as a society. And so I think this is very timely. So how can people learn more about that? And reaching out to you, or is it on your website?
It is on my website. My website is denasamuels.com. You can find it under my services. You'll see, a coaching, and there's a tab right there that will go. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And so, Jules, I'm not sure, did we have any questions or additional questions come through the chat?
Not that I can see, unless I missed something because of our tech stuff, but I don't see anything listed here. So I think we're good. But I did just also put the link for the website. So if anyone's interested, I've done group coaching before, and I have to say it's like the best way to transform. And not only that, you get so much support from being around like-minded people, and you get that sense of belonging that we've been talking about, and it just feels so good, and you transform so much quicker than doing it on your own. So if it is something, you should definitely check it out, because I think anything with a group is great. It definitely gets you wherever you're trying to go a lot quicker. So just put that in there.
I totally agree. I agree with you, Jules, because that's one of the reasons why I love this forum too, is that we can all get together, and it's a time for us to connect and reach out to the community, see what people are doing. I mean, we get these wonderful messages, not just in the chat here, but also through different social media platforms. And so it's a great way to get together and also have that outreach and just a diversity of people and thought. I mean, I love having Sumit on as a cultural leader in his area and his international exposure, and having Shar as a small business owner, and of course, Jules, your perspective and on the West Coast and your exposure to just media overall, and it's just and then we have these wonderful experts, of course, just like you, Dr. Samuels, that comes on, and having that group and exposure and those different experiences is what's diversity inclusion's all about, right? So it's, I think that's something that I've really come to love over the pandemic, and one of the positive things that have come from it is that as we all come together, we have better ideas and we're stronger for it.
Yeah, so. I think it's what got me through, because otherwise I would have felt so alone, like many people did, and I would have just been anxious every day. But it was such a timely thing to just join this mastermind, which I was like, okay, now I lost my job, I can't even really afford this, but here we go anyway. And it just kept me on track, because it distracted me from the fact that like all anyone was talking about was, you know, mask, pandemic, grocery stores being empty, all of the like, negative. But just knowing I had that call every second week, and a Facebook group, and you know, connecting with other people, it made me focus on something else, like something more productive. And I'm so thankful I did it. It changed everything for me. I'm like already ready for my next group experience. So yeah, if anyone's been like, you know, and you're your best investment at the end of the day, like that, you're never gonna regret investing in yourself, and you'll always learn something. You'll have some sort of breakthrough or transformation. So even if it's just one little breakthrough, it's worth it.
That's right. Wise words.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, Jules. I do agree that, you know, when other people are sharing their experiences or their challenges, or, you know, where they were struggling with a particular concept or whatever, you always get something out of it, like, oh, I never thought about it that way, or, oh, this person had some sort of a breakthrough, and you're like, oh, it's just constantly expanding. And that's what I have found in the group coaching experience as well. This one happens to be an 8-week process. So it's not forever, whatever. We go where we're going, and boom, it goes deep very quickly.
Yeah, 8 weeks is nothing. Like that's such a short amount. Yeah, mine was 6 months, so it was just a very long. But I'm glad, because it was right in the middle of all the craziness. But yeah, 8 weeks is great, because it seems very direct and to the point. Get down to work, and then you're done. And at the end of the 8 weeks, you're going to be a different person. So it's just, yep. I'm all in support of the group coaching programs.
Yeah, and making those connections too. I mean, it's good. It's a good way to network with others in similar situations as yourself. Yeah.
I mean, you meet people, like I've met people on the East Coast that I know I would have never met otherwise. Like, I'm like, when would I have bumped into you? Like, you just get connected with all these fabulous people from all over. It's like, it's so, yeah, it was one of the best things I did, even if I couldn't afford all of it. And I made it happen. I made it work, and it was worthwhile. So
Great. Well, once again, so if you're interested in Dena's, Dr. Dena Samuel's coaching and on how to become a better leader for 2022, please go visit her website. And but once again, Dr. Dena Samuels, I mean, it's been a pleasure, and enjoy having you on the forum and sharing your wisdom. So thank you once again for being with us today.
Absolutely. And I just want to say happy holidays to all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, may it all be an inclusive time of year for everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
And I am stuck. Oh, there we go.